Two retired detectives that were in the thick of New York crime, fast and hectic. They got some stories and some jokes, even an interview with the most popular folks. Off the cuff, one episode just ain't enough. Get a little laughter and an interview too. It's maybe the best thing you can do.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, Bill Cannon. I'm a 27-year retired veteran of the NYPD. And with me tonight is my co-host, straight out of Brooklyn, Phil Grimaldi. How you doing tonight, Phil?
I'm doing pretty good, Billy. How about you?
Doing excellent. And we brought back a crowd favorite tonight, too. John Palucci, a retired NYPD crime scene sergeant, who happens to be a ballistics expert and an expert on all things crime scene. And he's going to explain a few ballistic categories to us, and it'll help us understand much better about this whole thing in regards to Alec Baldwin and the shooting. There's been some new, I shouldn't really say new developments, but in the investigation, David Halls, who is the assistant director, he's changed up his statements a few times from the beginning. And right now, OSHA, who stands for the Organization of Safety, Occupational Safety and Health Administration.
That's it.
And they want to talk to David Halls in regards to what occurred on the set of Rust. And he's been ducking them. He's not making himself available. So a judge issued a subpoena to have him show up. Now, what could happen is he could show up and he could take the fifth and not speak, because you got to remember this case could also be a criminal case down the road. So he might not want to lock himself into any statements that he will make now or anytime in the future until it's determined whether or not this case, in fact, will go criminal, or is it just going to be a civil case. So based on his interview in the early stages of this investigation, he made a very specific statement, and now he's sort of changing it up. We're hearing a lot of different rumors. His attorney seemed to be a little confused, and she couldn't agree with whether he, in fact, handed the gun to Alec Baldwin, whether he did not hand it to Alec Baldwin, whether the armorer, Ms. Gutierrez Reed, handed it to him. So there's a lot of confusion there. But the biggest thing about this investigation is the most important interviews were the ones that were conducted by the police right after the investigation. They're going to hold the most water. They're going to hold the most credibility. And if there is a defendant, the defendant or defendants will be held to those statements much more than they would be to statements made on TV or self-serving statements made to news reporters. The other thing is that a letter was recently issued by some of the crew of Rust, and at least 25 of the crew signed it, indicating that contrary to popular belief, the Rust set was not fast and furious and loose and ignoring safety. They were doing things the way they were supposed to do. I mean, that sounds like a very self-serving type of letter that may be, encouraged to write by the powers that be that have the most to lose in this case. Your thoughts, Phil?
Well, Bill, right as we were going on the air, as the open was playing, I just got a notification on my phone relative to what we're going to talk about tonight. Alec Baldwin's cell phone, they are doing a search warrant on his phone related to the Rust investigation. It's been requested in a new search warrant that was released Thursday by the Santa Fe Sheriff's Department, and they want to search his phone for any evidence related to the death of Helena Hutchins. It's requesting a warrant for seizure and search of Alec Baldwin's cell phone and search of any evidence related to the death investigation of Helena Hutchins. The affidavit obtained by Fox News says basically they believe there may be evidence on the phone due to individuals using the cell phone during or after the commission of the crime. Now, this is telling me that things are really beginning to heat up. You got the request by OSHA to speak with the AD Halls, and now you have this new search warrant just issued a little while ago. Apparently, such information, if it exists, may be material and relevant to the investigation. They were made aware of several emails and details in text messages sent and received regarding movie production rust in the course of interview. Obviously, reps for Baldwin did not immediately respond to Fox News for comment. So basically, we were going to talk about Halls. This just broke. I think it's very relevant. It seems like things are now starting to heat up. I think that during the investigative process, we know that there were initial interviews. Now that the investigation has gone on for several weeks, I think that they're starting to dig down. They were probably met with, I'm not going to talk without my attorney. I'm not going to make any further statements. So now they're trying to turn up the heat a little bit. I think that the latest development on this search warrant of Alec Baldwin's cell phone, I mean, if he takes the phone and he smashes it with a hammer, those text messages are still memorialized by the cell phone company so they can get them. It would just show a reluctance to cooperate with the investigation. And I think that, there's going to be some explaining to do. It sounds like maybe somebody else might have been using the phone based on interviews that took place in the early stages of the investigation, Bill.
Phil, that could be so damaging as to be unbelievable, because you have to realize he could have texted his wife, I just shot somebody.
Right.
Accidentally, and I pulled the trigger. He could have admitted to that via a text message. Now, as you said, people don't understand. You could destroy your phone, you could get rid of it, you could lose it. They could still just subpoena your carrier and get all the information that was inside your phone. So even if you try to destroy it, that is not going to destroy the text messages. It's not going to destroy the evidence. And this is a huge thing, because I think it sort of shows that they're considering this to be potentially a criminal investigation.
Absolutely, Bill. And I think what they're going to be looking for is obviously what I stated, that there may be text messages or information from other people. It looks like he let someone else use his phone. Now, again, like you just said, suppose he called his wife or he texted his wife and said, I just shot somebody by accident. That I don't think is going to play so much into the criminal investigation. We all know that he fired the shot, and I don't think there's any reluctance to the fact that it was an accident. But maybe there was something, who had this gun loaded? Why were those guys playing with the gun? He might have related something in a text message that might be very relevant to how a loaded firearm got on the set of that film. And then who was it that he allowed to use his cell phone? That's what I think is going to be of the utmost importance, because that's what it mentions in the actual search warrant application, that there was information from interviews that were garnered in the early stages of the investigation that lead the investigators to believe there might be relevant information regarding text messages by other people that were allowed access to the phone.
Well, Phil, in listening to his statement to George Stephanopoulos, that when the gun, miraculously just went off without him pulling the trigger, he claims to have no idea that she was shot. He claims that he stood over her for about a minute and he thought she fainted, which is totally disingenuous, because there was a loud boom. And there was also a guy named Joel Sosa, who was the director, who was screaming in pain that he was shot in the shoulder. So the same bullet hit Miss Helena Hutchins and hit Joel Sosa in the shoulder. So for him to say he thought she fainted is just absolutely ridiculous. And
that thought could have crossed his mind in the first 4-5 seconds. But once you start hearing the other person screaming, she's on the floor, she's obviously going unconscious. I don't think it took more than a few seconds to figure out that a shot was fired.
Folks, I'm seeing people in the chat questioning why that his cell phone was just a search warrant was requested. Now, you cannot erase the information on your cell phone. It's just much like a computer. The carrier, it's there almost, as far as I know, it's there for almost ever, including the text messages. So all you guys saying, could he have wiped it clean? I don't think he could.
Well, Billy, now I have a little bit of experience in recent years regarding cell phone technology and stuff, and there's two ways that it's saved. One, it goes to your cloud. Your own personal email hooks up to the cloud so you can retrieve your own stuff. The second way is the carrier is under law by federal law. They have to hold every message or phone call, not the exact taping, or they don't listen to your calls, but when you dial a number, it will register what number you called and how long you spoke to that person, from your number to the other number that you called and how long the phone call was. Now, that has to be held for 365 days. On day 366, it gets erased. However, it is backed up through the National Security Agency for 5 years. So if it was, let's say, some type of an espionage case, or it was something that dealt with national security, they can get it up to 5 years. However, the carrier is only obligated to hold it by law for 1 year. So we're within a year. He can erase the phone. He can break the phone. They can go into his cloud. They can get a subpoena for that, or they can get a subpoena for the carrier. Either one of the two will reveal what was said on the text messages when this incident took place.
That's fantastic. So, folks in the chat, so you can see that the chat and the cell phone calls, the calls coming in, the calls going out are always recorded for at least a 1 year period. The other part of this investigation, before I bring John Palucci on, which I know all you guys are anxiously waiting for, is that 25 members of the staff of the movie Rust wrote a letter, talking about how the set was safe. It was not fast and loose. They followed things by the book, but that's sort of like a smokescreen, because it's clear that it wasn't very safe, because there's people that left the scene. There's people that are now suing Alec Baldwin. So that it's sort of like a smokescreen, and it doesn't make much sense why they sent this letter out. Phil, thoughts?
It's obviously self-serving. I mean, listen, we know for a fact, this is not hearsay, this is a fact. There were several people that worked on the set that were unhappy with the safety conditions that were being displayed in the previous days before the incident that took place where Helena Hutchins and Sousa, she lost her life and he was shot. Now, there was people that left the set, resigned from the set. They made their safety concerns known. So anybody that's going to sign on is obviously going to try and be loyal to the production for future work and things like that. So I think that it's very self-serving. That's something that could have been brought out in court. However, they made it public. They're just trying to, we call it in the police department, Bill, you'll be familiar with the term CYA, cover your ass. That's what they're looking to do. They're looking to cover their ass. I don't think there's any doubt about that. This is like 2 and 2 adds up to 4. It's not that hard to see. You don't need to, you don't need a law degree to figure this stuff out. Just the whole way that things are taking place and how this investigation is going and the things that are happening now, that as we were going on the air, this came over. I think that you're going to be looking at criminal charges down the line. Somebody is going to be facing criminal charges. I think it's clear.
I think there's a very good chance of that. And all these legal experts are talking, oh, no, it's not going to happen, except our own Joe Murray. He said the very good possibility someone could be charged, or multiple people could be charged. So let's not, jump to conclusions that there could be no criminal charges in this case. There very well could be. And as we mentioned earlier, the charges would be either of a reckless nature,
Yep,
or of a manslaughter nature. And that the intent, I think I've said this a couple of times, criminal culpability, there's 4 ways: recklessly, intentionally, criminally negligently, or knowingly. And those are the culpable mental states of mind. And I'm not going to give a lecture on the law, but
that was pretty good, though. That was pretty good.
Yeah, I remember, because I remember the acronym RIC, and I always remembered that. I used to teach my students that. What's RIC? And they would be like, oh, my professor, why are you messing with us? So tonight we have.
You know what, Billy, too? Here's one thing, a point I got to make. When a police officer puts on a uniform and goes to work, or a firefighter, or someone in the military, they go into battle, the chances of you getting hurt are definitely there and not going home to your family. Now, someone that's on a movie set, there really is almost an exception, and you almost feel like the chances of that person getting killed are very minute unless there's some strange accident. So that's where the culpability is going to come into this. How did those live rounds get on the set of this movie and get into that gun, and that he fires the shot and that young lady is dead, and now that Souza is injured from the injury from the bullet. So I think that's where the criminality is going to come in. It's reckless. It's what you said. Reckless behavior is what caused this horrible accident.
Well, you know something that someone in the chat is saying, if you're ruling out murder, you're not doing your job. Well, murder is usually intentionally. All right.
Yeah.
There's not usually a criminal statute of recklessly or criminal negligence in murder. But however, it is in manslaughter and it is in criminally negligent homicide.
Right.
The term homicide simply means death caused by another, and it doesn't always even have to be criminal. So that's just all that means. Murder is a whole different thing, and it goes to intent and possibly, it doesn't have to have motive, but usually when there is an intentional murder, there is a motive to it. I want to bring on our great expert, our crime scene expert, retired NYPD Sergeant John Palucci, patiently waiting in the wings in our green room.
How's it going?
Welcome, John.
I got to paint this room green, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. It's actually his own room. We didn't buy that room for him.
I love hearing you guys talk. Really, it's incredible. It reminds me of the days, like just bantering theories around and stuff like that. You guys have so much knowledge. It's really wonderful.
Spitballing. We call that spitballing.
Yeah, exactly. OSHA could actually be some pretty significant leverage, right? Because OSHA creates standards, and you have to be in compliance with these standards, or even guidelines. And if there's live ammo on the set, whatever it is, they're way outside of the guidelines. And guess what that means, right? That means they have the authority to shut this company down, and that means money. And I think friendship and all that goes out the window when you see big dollars, starting to disappear. So there's a lot of leverage there. OSHA's got a lot of power. You can't really underestimate that. I think it's a step in the right direction. One thing I'm thinking about, it took a long time for them to get the phone, right? People, there were rumors. I don't know if you guys have heard any more about that, about people actually firing live rounds on the set or, some other area of the set. I'm wondering, if he has photos on the camera. I think you might be able to tell there was a deletion, but you wouldn't know what the photo was, So maybe, something like that. Hey, let me take a few selfies of, shooting this beer can or whatever it is, So,
John, I think he made a statement that he was shooting the gun under the direction and supervision of the armorer. So that would sort of indicate that there were live rounds. And the chief from Santa Fe also said that they discovered not just the live round that was in the gun that killed Helena Hutchins, but several other live rounds.
I think it was up to 100, Billy. I saw one of the press conferences where they said there was an in excess of 500 rounds altogether collected by crime scene. However, they said there was up to 100 live rounds found. I mean, whether it's 1 round or 100 rounds, I don't think it matters. There shouldn't even be one,
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. It's you're opening the door right there.
There should be no live rounds on that set. That's for sure.
Yeah. So, very interesting stuff, and he in his interview, he said that he had training, right? Firearms training. And he talked about these armors. When I was reading articles about the armors, they didn't even have the nomenclature right for anything on these firearms. It's like when people say, yeah, we got the slug out of the body, right? It's not a slug. It's but somebody who's familiar with firearms, knows that this isn't a drum. You know what I mean? This isn't a hatch back here. These are, this is your cylinders, your loading gate. So how can you be an armorer that doesn't even know the proper nomenclature for the firearms that you're working with, right? These guns right here. Remember, so this is a single action Colt. I don't know if anybody else saw this from last time. It is a single action Colt. This is actually a 22, but it is the same design as the old Colts. This is actually a Peacemaker, right? And this is what they call single action only. That's the gun. That's the Pietà right there, which is a replica of a Colt, right? So that's pretty similar to the firearm they were using on the set. They're not that expensive either, those replicas. But so you can see that it has all the has a lot of similarities with this firearm right here, right? So this is our base pin. What's interesting about these single action guns is you see how we swing the cylinder out like that, right? Everybody remembers that from the academy. If you had a revolver in the academy and you had your speed loaders, but it's very easy to check this gun. You just swing the cylinder out, and that's it. On this firearm, the cylinder doesn't swing out, right? So it's got this base pin here that holds the cylinder in. But the way these guns are loaded and unloaded is through this loading gate, right? And the only way you can do that is you pull the hammer halfway back, and you can turn the cylinder and load it, or you can pull on this your ejector rod and you can unload it like that, right? So if you want to take the cylinder out, you're going to have to pull this. You have like a set for the base pin, and you have to. It's really tricky to manipulate these things. Let me see. So you got to pull this. You got to pull that pin out that we just saw right here, right? You got to have the hammer halfway back. You got to have the loading gate open, right? And then you can drop your cylinder out like that. So to check these guns is a little bit more work than to check the revolvers that we're used to, right? So now we have no cylinder in the gun, and so that one was a 45. This one's a 22. As far as pulling the trigger goes, like not touching the trigger and the hammer dropping. What's wrong with his story? You see this half cock position, which is for loading, right? So we could turn the cylinder. It's not going to go back past that half cock, right? If the gun's fully cocked, that hammer's not going to drop either, right? The only way I'm dropping that hammer is by pulling the trigger, and that's it. That's the only way that hammer is going to drop. I saw a lot of interesting comments in our last one about the gun being modified for that like kind of Western fanning thing, where you wouldn't even have like a sear that holds the hammer back or anything like that. That's an interesting theory. I don't think that they're doing anything like that. As I said, when a firearm goes to the firearms identification unit, there's two things that are going to happen. You're going to have the bullet or fragment or whatever was pulled out of that guy's arm. That's going to be compared to a test fire from the 45 long Colt that Pieta, and determine whether or not this is the firearm that actually fired it. Right. So that's the first thing they're going to do. Actually, it's the second thing they're going to do. First thing they're going to do is an operability test. They're going to test all the safety features on this gun. They're going to see if this thing was modified. Right. So you have armorers on the set. An armorer is somebody that says, hey, you know what, this base pin got bent. I'm going to put a new base pin in. That's an armorer, right? They're just parts replacement people, but they should know what the parts are called, right? So a gunsmith is somebody who can actually go inside of this firearm and modify it so that you do have those much less safe features, such as an ability to just fan the hammer and it's going to fire every single time. I doubt that it was like that. People have brought up there's been some really, really interesting points brought up on your chats.
John, someone just asked, and I want to ask you this because I'm by no means a ballistics expert. Someone just asked, where is the firing pin on that firearm? Is it a
I was just going to ask that.
That's a good one. Yeah, so there's a mechanism here.
Is it a floating fire pin, John?
Yeah, so the hammer impacts that. I thought so. Right? Yeah, but if you look at the Smith, right?
The pin is right on the hammer.
Look at this one. We notice isn't loaded, right? Yeah. So the pin is on the back of the hammer. You can see the firing pin right there. So that gun is a replica of the Colt.
Is the gun in question? Do you know if it has a firing pin on the hammer, or is it also a floating firing pin?
I believe it will be the same. If it's a replica, it should be the same as this one here.
Okay.
I don't know if we had pictures of that one with the hammer back. I don't think we do though.
Right? I don't.
Yeah, there is a picture of it.
Let's see.
The last time we showed one where it cocked. I think it's in someone's hand, Bill.
Oh no, I don't know if I have. Let me see if I still have that picture. Yeah, I do actually. There we go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so there's a firing pin on that hammer.
Firing pin on the hammer.
Yeah.
So basically, the only way that gun is going to fire is if that hammer, bangs up against a live round.
Yeah, so the hammer's got to the firing pin's got to strike a primer, right? And the primer is impact sensitive, right? So the primer is going to explode. Bullets, cartridges don't explode. It's a burning of gunpowder, and that builds up pressure within the cartridge, and then the bullet is actually propelled down the barrel, right? So what's interesting too is when he claims that he didn't know that the gun had a live round in it. This is somebody that's supposedly trained, right? So think about Newton's third law, right? Which is for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So when you watch those TV shows where the guy, this has you could put a Magnum in here, right? So if I shot somebody with a Magnum 357 round and the guy goes flying through a window, right? If he went flying through a window, then I'm going to be flying in this direction, right? So that's just physics. That's all there is to it. If I'm firing a gun, there are firearms that are powerful enough to knock people down, like a lot of rifles and stuff. We've seen that. You can watch that all day on YouTube. But so we have an equal and opposite reaction, right? Now, when you think about a bullet traveling down, remember we looked at that Glock, Bill? But just to make something really clear, this is another revolver, right?
John, do you want me to play that video of that Glock?
Yeah, let me just make this one point, and then
sure.
So you see, this is unloaded, right? So this is actually a 38 357. This one's double action only. Double action only. The only way this gun's going to go off is if I pull the trigger, right? See the cylinder turn? That's the only way this gun's going to go off. This one is single or double, right? So always check it again, right? Every time I pull the trigger, right, two things happen. Hammer goes back, hammer goes forward. Hammer goes back, hammer goes forward, right? I could also cock this gun and then have it be single action, right? So this one's single or double. This one's double only, and this one here is single action. The only way to fire this is to cock the hammer. I have to cock the hammer on that thing to get it to go.
John, I remember when we first came on the job, I came on in 1985, they had on revolvers, you could cock them.
Yes.
And the police department didn't want that to happen anymore because there were several bad accidents where officers had cocked the gun and accidentally shot and killed somebody.
Sure.
So they used to train us to how to lower the hammer on a live round. I don't know if you remember that, if you were in the academy then. So the gun, you have to put your thumb between the hammer and the round.
Yeah. So I was a silver gun. I had a revolver, but it didn't have the spur on the hammer. So I was you would call me a rookie. Now anybody that's ever had a revolver is a dinosaur, right? So you're saying like this. So basically, you want to get that hammer moving forward, so you won't drop it. Because if you try and hot dog it and uncock it like this, you might accidentally slip and have an accident.
And then the gun would go off. Yes.
Yeah, and because it goes down to like maybe 2-3 pounds of pressure, very 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 low pressure. For me to pull this trigger, watch, I'm just barely touching it, and it goes off. Now, for me to shoot double action, I really got to pull on this thing, right?
Right.
So it used to unnerve you a little bit when you're in a stairwell, going up to an apartment or something. You hear the guy behind you. You're like, oh God, don't trip on the stairs.
Not good.
John, there was a funny story years ago when I worked in the 2-0. The commanding officer in the ICO worked an unannounced midnight tour, and they showed up in plainclothes unannounced on a burglary and burst through the roof door, and one of the cops fired a shot at them.
Wow.
Thank God he missed them.
Yeah.
But he was like startled, and he fired a shot, and and they realized they were wrong too.
Yeah,
but they should have announced over the radio.
We're showing up in plainclothes, but they were more concerned with maybe catching someone wearing white socks. I don't know what the hell they were thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
And and so they they downplayed it because they didn't even. I don't even think the cop got in trouble because then they would have to out themselves as being wrong too.
Yeah, some people should be the police, and some people should just call.
Anytime when we were in anti-crime and we wound up in the backyard, we would always say, "Central, be advised, plainclothes officers in the backyard." And I even worked with a African American officer, and he would say, "Central, be advised," because there was a lot of African Americans in the area I worked. Central, be advised, African American officer in the backyard, that he didn't want to get shot by a fellow officer. So
That's Phil. That's
safety
why.
protocol.
That's why a lot of African American officers didn't want to work anti-crime, because it was that much more dangerous for them. It really was.
Course.
Yeah. And there's always the danger when you're working in plain clothes of getting shot by friendly fire. That could happen no matter what your race. But that's always a good thing to announce your presence on the radio. Uniform officers, anti-crime is on the scene. Just realize we're coupling such and such unmarked car. Especially, you say it's street crime, an anti-crime unit from outside the borough. And
that's even more dangerous, because they're not going to know you. They're not going to recognize you.
No one knows you. Yeah, exactly. So you got to announce yourself. John, do you want me to play that little video of the Glock?
Yeah, let me. I'll just do a quick intro for something like that, right? Let's go
sure.
fast. So this is a 350. This is a 38 plus P, right? And is it? Maybe it's a 357. No, there's a 38 plus P, right? So look at the size of the case. Think about how much powder goes in there, right? This is a 45 long Colt. Look at the size of that case, right? Holds a lot of powder. So we're not talking about a toy gun. Whatever's in it, right? And obviously, it's a gun that's capable of discharging a round. So when you think about it now, so this is a 38 plus P. This is a hollow point, right? And this is a 38 caliber, 38, 357, 380, 9mm. They're all the same diameter, right? Here's the thing. So watch this. This bullet has a copper jacket on it, right? And this is the barrel that it's going to get fired out of, right? So watch this. When I go to put the bullet part of this cartridge inside the barrel, I'm putting pressure on this, and you can still see part of the copper jacket, right? That's because of the lands and grooves. Like, so you have lands and grooves. If you can look at that barrel, you'll see there's like a spiral inside of there, and you see how there's like notches around the outside. So those are grooves, and then lands are the ones that stick out. So what happens is the bullet fits so tightly in there that it's actually being cut by the lands as it travels through there, and then you're getting striations on it from even from the grooves, right? So essentially, what I'm telling you is, like, this is a tight fit, right? This is a really tight fit. So a bullet is going to build a lot of pressure behind it. Now, if we could look at that Glock video, Bill, that'd be great. So what we're going to see is a Glock being fired. See, there's some smoke that comes out ahead of the bullet, and then the bullet, and then a big plume of smoke behind the bullet, right? So what's happening is that burning powder is building up all that pressure behind the bullet, and the bullet is being forced through the barrel, and it's a very tight fit, right? So now you have, think about think about a bottle of soda. If you had something like put a piece of tape over the mouth of it and you shook it up, right? Just a piece of tape on there, right? And it's going to kind of fizz out all around the tape. Now stick a cork in there and shake it up, right? You're going to have a lot more pressure building up. You're going to have an action of the cork being forced out of the bottle, right? So this is what's happening here, right? You can see a much larger plume of smoke. Some of the smoke escapes around the bullet, and then you have the bullet exiting the muzzle, and then you have that large plume behind it, which is where the bullet's getting all that pressure behind it, right? So now if you go back to that analogy of the soda bottle, where you shake it up with a cork in it, right? Now that cork is going to take off out of that bottle, so that's creating an action. There's going to be an equal and opposite reaction. So when that bullet leaves the muzzle, you're going to feel a recoil, versus if it was just open and if you fired just basically a 45 long Colt with a little bit of wadding in the end of it, and this thing's full of powder, right? When you fire it, there's not going to be that pressure that builds up behind the bullet, right? So you're going to have a noticeable recoil when you fire that with a bullet in it versus firing these blanks. So if this is a guy that's got all this training and fires blanks on the sets all the time and stuff like that, and has no idea that something went wrong, there were a lot of indicators that something went wrong. I mean,
So if he was firing blanks in the past and now he's firing a live round, there would be a noticeable difference,
I would
correct,
believe
John?
there's a noticeable difference. Sure, why not? Yeah, yeah.
You know, John, I've fired, and I'm sure Phil probably has too. I fired a 45 caliber semi-automatic, and it is so super powerful. If you fire 50 rounds, it actually your hand hurts at the end of firing 50 rounds because the recoil on that, like you saw, and we were looking at a 9mm, and that was in super slow motion.
Yeah.
But the 45 has tremendous recoil, and so for him to say that he didn't know that he fired a live round is just, it does not pass the smell test,
Right. Yeah. And, and somebody having a bullet in their arm, like, wouldn't you expect to hear, you just shot me, you son of a bitch, or something like that,
That plays into his story that he didn't know for about a minute that anybody was shot. He thought she would fainted. Number one, you have obviously what John just pointed out, that the one guy was screaming, "I'm hit." She's on the floor. And then he's got to know the difference that now the gun threw out a tremendous recoil, as opposed to when you're firing a blank, the recoil is obviously much, much less. So I think he could have put that together in seconds, as opposed to, not knowing for a minute. That sounds like baloney to me.
Well, Phil, especially the loud noise that a gun makes, besides all the other things, the recoil, the smoke, the fact that two people were shot with one projectile,
right?
That gives you a pretty damn good idea that this was no boating accident. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a great point. The fact that the bullet had enough energy to pass through a human body, and then actually, so they call that a perforating wound, what we used to call through and through. So perforating one body and then penetrating another one. That's that's a live cartridge. That's not like somebody put something together and like, oh yeah, instead of a wadding, we used bubble gum. Boy, that's pretty powerful stuff. That's probably a commercial cartridge, or somebody who does reloading that made a cartridge with a bullet on it.
John, the one thing, of course, that everyone's talking about is, and I don't know if they'll ever find this out, who the hell put a live round in that firearm?
Yeah, it's really mind blowing. You know what I mean? How safety conscious you have to be with firearms. I mean, to handle this gun, how many times I checked this before we came on the air? I check it every single time I pick it up. And right now it's pointing in a direction that it's pointed towards a window, and there's like 300 yards. I'm sort of pointed towards a wall, and there's like 300 yards on the other side of that wall. So, I mean, you have to be ultra safety conscious, to have these things, and to know somebody knows that there's live cartridges mixed in to this location, right? Now, I took a course by some former ATF agents. That was a fantastic course. It was all about these really off the wall makes of firearms and how to handle them, how to make them safe, and do all these things. This was all cops in this course. I was retired, but everybody else was active. And before you walked in there, you had to make sure like all your ammo is in your car. These are cops, right? They did not want one live round in that building. So you had to show them, hey, here's my gun. It's in slide lock. I don't have, you want to check my pockets, whatever it is, because you don't take that chance, right? I don't know what this training that he talks about is all about, but
had they utilized ultra safety, we wouldn't be talking about this. It's
exactly
clear, so.
Exactly. Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about, and John, if you want to take part in this, you're welcome to also. I want to talk a little bit about the interviews that occurred on the very day that this happened. Of all, Phil, we had gone this route before. 16 people were inside that church when this shooting occurred. And obviously, you want to separate all of them. You want to interview all of them. I don't know if, in fact, extensive enough interviews were done of the principals. To me, the principals was, of course, Alec Baldwin, David Halls, and the armorer Miss Gutierrez Reed. according to Alec Baldwin's statement with George Snuffleupagus there, he said that he was only interviewed by the police for an hour and 15 minutes. To me, after an investigation like this, that is not a long enough time to get a real accurate statement. And then also getting accurate statements from the three principals is the most important. And then you also have 13 other people to interview separately from them so that you can, when you come up with a pretty good idea as investigators of what the hell occurred, now you want to challenge the principals and you want to challenge some of the witnesses if the stories differ from each other. That takes time. That takes way more than an hour and 15 minutes. And if they didn't do that, because once you let everyone go home that night, the stories are all going to change tremendously, as you see they are changing right now, as lawyers get to them, as they talk to other people, as they talk to insurance companies, as they talk to risk management, as they talk to people that invested in the film. All their stories change. So that's why it's so important to lock those statements in that very night. Philly, I know you're chomping at the bit to come at this one.
Oh, I am, because it's clear what you just laid out. Halls' attorney, Delisa Tarraco, says that he did not hand the gun to Alec Baldwin. He never had possession of that gun when the accident occurred. However, it's detailed in one of the search warrants that Halls grabbed the gun from the cart, yelled out "safe gun," and handed it to Alec Baldwin. So I think that obviously he's going to wind up with a problem. If his position under oath, he's going to say that I did not hand the gun to Alec Baldwin, he's going to get caught in a perjury trap, because he apparently has said that, and maybe other people said that too. So he's going to have an issue there, 100%. Now, regarding, the shots that were allegedly fired at target practice in the days prior, I would want to know who was present when those shots were fired. And then I'm going to ask each one of them individually, where did you get the ammunition from? How many rounds were present? What did you do with the rounds after you finished target practice? Those are going to be the vital and the important questions to lead to criminal charges, because whoever put the guns into the round may not really be on the table. They may not know exactly that. But the person that had rounds, live rounds on a movie set, that's the person that obviously is reckless. There's going to be much more detail. Maybe they can actually find out who was the person that put these live rounds into the gun. But that's what I would be drawing down on and digging down on. I want to know who was present when those shots were being fired during that target practice, because that's the link to this horrible accident.
100%. Mr. Deja Vu King from the chat says FBI search warrant for Alec Baldwin's phone has been issued in the last 10 minutes. So is that in addition to the Santa Fe police, or is this the search warrant we're talking about?
I believe I got the notification as the open was coming on, and that's probably one and the same. So it says it was from the, I'll read it again real quick, but I think it was from the Santa Fe police, but maybe the FBI is the one that's doing the press release, because I don't see the FBI doing a search warrant on this when you have the local authorities, Bill. I don't think it's an FBI, has the jurisdiction over it at this point.
No, they don't. Folks, I just want to thank all you guys that are in the chat. I just see that there's still a lot of interest in this case, and it's going to remain a lot of interest. And it's interesting to us because it brings in science, it brings in the art of investigation as well as the science. And Phil and I are the artists, and John Paolucci is the scientist. So we think we can give you both sides of the investigative coin. And I find it really interesting because investigation, you got to put the pieces of the puzzle together. And the fact is, people do not tell the truth. So finding truth is the biggest part of investigation. So I want to thank all you folks for listening. If you're not subscribed, please go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, give us a thumbs up, join our Patreon, support Police Off the Cuff. And if you want to be part of the YouTube family, you can join our YouTube channel. That's signified by folks in the chat with the green font. They're part of the Police Off the Cuff family, and we appreciate each and every one of you guys in supporting our channel. So, John,
Really, I pulled up on the phone. I'm going to try and hold it up to the camera. I don't know if you'll be able to read it. Sheriff issues search warrant as focus turns to Baldwin and Rush shooting probe. So it appears that the Santa Fe sheriff was the one who issued the warrant. It was probably released that that listener, subscriber, fan, whatever you want to call him, probably saw a blog or something that maybe it came from an FBI media source or something like that. But it looks like it was issued by the Santa Fe sheriff.
You know, Phil, it's very possible until the FBI has the tool that regular law enforcement doesn't have, and that's if you lie to the FBI, you can be arrested. You can lie to your heart's content to the local police, and they can't arrest you for lying. However, the FBI can arrest you just for lying to a federal agent. I wish we did have that tool.
Yeah, so do I. I remember through the early days of 9/11, post 9/11, I was assigned to the intelligence division, and we would go out on leads, and we would always try to grab, we were working in conjunction with the FBI, and we would always try to grab an FBI agent or two to come with us. So that way, while we were doing our interview, we would make them very well aware of it. If you lie in the presence of this FBI agent, you could be, you could be liable for a year in jail for lying to a federal agent. And we had a case, one in particular, where it was related to an anthrax hoax. It turned out to be a hoax, but the minute that we introduced the FBI agent, the guy began to sweat, and he came out with the real deal. So it's just a great tool for law enforcement to have a federal agency, FBI agent, working with you, especially on a case like that, a terrorism thing. Was really, really helpful.
That's great. John Palucci, I want to ask you, we're talking about the art of investigation, which to me is the police work, the interview, the interrogation, the trying to get to the truth, but you're the science guy, and science can absolutely, make it closed and shut case, because science is so much more reliable than the art. I always used to love in a homicide case if we got something forensic that we could hang our hat on. If you got DNA, if you got a fingerprint, if you got a footprint, if you got anything that you could forensically tie someone to a scene to, and believe it or not, people think because of the CSI effect that there's always evidence on the scene. There's always physical evidence. There's always fibers. There's always blood. There's always DNA. And I forget the famous expression we were using: absence of, what is it? Absence of evidence.
Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
I love that.
Actually,
I just love that.
Paul Kirk was a very famous forensic scientist. He was in the Sam Shepard case. He did the bloodstain pattern analysis. Remember the old Sam Shepard murder from Ohio? He was a doctor, was wrongfully convicted. I think, he was OJ's lawyer too. F. Lee Bailey. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He was on that case. But so Paul Kirk says that it's there, right? Because there was, remember Locard's exchange principle, right? Every contact leaves a trace. When I leave this chair, some of me is in the chair, some of the chair is with me, right? So that happens. Like it's, according to Locard and Paul Kirk, the only thing that's hindering us is our inability to find it. We might not have the technology to find it. Think about where we are now with technology versus where we were even just 10, 15 years ago. We're actually taking ourselves out of usefulness with DNA analysis. It's become so sensitive that we get these mixtures, right? And DNA is really a quantitative discipline where it's all done with numbers, and very easy if you have a single source to identify somebody. And when you have mixtures, that's where you start getting into a little bit more of a subjective area with DNA, right? So we're at the point now where testing is so sensitive, we could get a profile off of just about anything. However, we're going to start getting more and more mixtures with the more we amp up the sensitivity on that kind of testing, But it's also been said, crime scene reconstruction. Now, this whole thing's got to be reconstructed. And 16 people there.
Well, John, how come your number isn't ringing off the hook right now? Forensic.
They must
It just may one of the defense. If there's charges, it's one of the defendants.
They have to know that you're not forensics for free. You're crime scene investigation.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Well, I think the problem is they wouldn't want to pay me to come in there after being on your show because we're kind of sinking their ship, right? You know,
in a way, yeah.
But who knows? It might save one of the other people that could be charged.
That's true.
I just want to read the statement that Chris Hoyle.
This is important. This is
it is very important. I'd like to know if drug tests were done on all of the people before they left the set. Pot is legal here in New Mexico. Chris Hoyle, I can answer. Very, very doubtful. First of all, to do a drug test, they would have to get a search warrant.
Yeah.
No one's going to voluntarily take a drug test. Even Alec Baldwin. He would refuse, and then a judge would have to issue an order to take his blood, and that wasn't done. So, as far as I know, it wasn't done. So,
Bill, I'm glad that this point was brought up because recently I was talking to a former colleague, and he was injured. Obviously, a member of the police department, injured, and he was actually by one of his doctors was going to prescribe him legal marijuana. However, had he taken that prescription, he would not have been able to carry his firearm. He would have had to surrender his firearm until whatever period of time it is that this legal marijuana would have left his system. He probably would have had to go through testing and may have lost his gun for quite a period of time, So now you're talking about what's the liability end of putting a gun into someone's hand that could be intoxicated on a legal drug. That was a great question to bring up.
Great question.
Well, Philly, I'd just like to go one step further with that. If you have a gun permit in New York State and you apply for a pharmaceutical drug card to get marijuana, they're connected and you will lose your gun permit.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very sneaky of these libs, but that's what it is.
It's good about that question. I mean, you guys will probably know more than me, but don't you think we have a dead human body, right? Isn't there enough there? Remember, like after the Sean Bell shooting, I think it was mandatory breathalyzers for if you're involved in a shooting, right? Or not even the breathalyzer, the full.
Officers don't have the same rights as regular citizens. You're right. If you're involved in a shooting,
involved shooting, yeah,
right, you're required to take a drug test.
I'm saying so, but isn't there enough to compel somebody, them to submit this test because you do have a dead person here? What's the degree of recklessness? Are you intoxicated? Are you know what I mean? Or maybe, so it's an accident, probably, accident, still a homicide, as you were saying before, though, because death at the hands of another, right? But you have a dead person here. We have reckless behavior. Do they have enough to compel them to submit to these types of tests?
Yes. Via a search warrant signed by a judge, they could make him give his blood or his DNA or his whatever.
I think the armorer could be compelled because she's the one that is responsible for the safe handling of the firearms, the safeguarding of the firearm, the loading and unloading of the firearm. So what was her mental state? I would like to have had her drug tested at that time. And if she was intoxicated, then obviously the mistake could have been made very easily.
On the earlier show, I covered a little bit of this. And one of the things that Alec Baldwin said when he was being interviewed by the police was one of the police or the investigator, the detective, I don't know if it was a male or female, she showed him a picture of the projectile that was taken out of Mr. Sosa's
shoulder.
His shoulder. And I immediately said, that's not good investigative protocol. You never tell people what you have. You solicit information. You don't give them information. So I don't know why that investigator told Alec Baldwin that. No, this was a real round. We took it out of his shoulder. I think that was a mistake.
Yeah, that shouldn't have been discussed. I mean, I don't know, maybe at the end of the interview after they have all of the information, I mean, you could have told them, you didn't have to actually show them, but that's something that, I don't think that should have been done. I mean, it's like when we were talking last night about a detective showing up at the scene of a rape or a sexual abuse and asking the victim for a pen. The guy shouldn't be in the bureau if you do something like that. The guy shouldn't be a cop. I mean, that was the first thing they told you day one when you got sworn in. A watch and a pen is probably going to be the tools you're going to need the most on the job, because you're going to want to write stuff down and you're going to want to know what time it is. So, I mean, I don't know. That's pretty. That sounds like something that happens 1 in a million, you know. But
if you're a Columbo fan, though, that was his trademark. You know, he's always looking for that. You got for a pencil too. You got a pencil,
and the cigar in the mouth.
Yeah.
And the other famous thing was one last thing when he said that, you knew it was coming to an end. One last thing.
You know, one of the things I wanted to say about these interviews too, especially the police interviews, and we discussed it earlier, is that the first interview that you give to the police, that is really the baseline of the truth. That's going to be considered to be the truth more than any other statement you make at any other time, because you're going to change up based on your liability, based on if you have a criminal liability, based on the fact that you spoke to an attorney, based on the fact that you spoke to other people about the case. So that's why it's so important, and I've said this ad nauseum, for the detectives to lock in these statements and to make sure that the statements are as accurate as possible. And again, we said you do that by challenging the principles with the statements of the others. So you somehow, out of all of that, you get the real truth as to what actually occurred.
Yeah, it's
You know what else too, Billy? Right off the bat, we're going to use Halls as an example. So now the first day, the interview, he says, I handed the gun to Alec Baldwin. Now his lawyer is saying, no, he never did that. He gets on the stand. Prosecution can attack his credibility by saying, so you said this on the first day, but you're saying this now. You didn't hand the gun. Which day were you lying? And I mean, right there, he's got to answer. He can't say I did both. He's going to say, well, you know, this is the truth. I didn't hand the gun. And so that means you lied on the day. So you see where I'm going with it? That's something that will attack the credibility. Very, very important what you said, Billy. Very, very important that when you do any investigation, if it's a homicide or if it's a serious assault or something to that nature, you need to get a good interview done as soon as possible. Lock the person in. Now, if they change the story down the line, that's on them. They can do what they want with their attorneys, but you have a great statement. You have a very strong statement. You're locking them into a story. And then again, like you said, it can also be used based on other statements. Now there's a conflict. The stories aren't lining up. Inconsistencies, minor, are always expected. People see things differently. They remember things differently. But if you got a major inconsistency, like one person is saying, no, the armor didn't hand the gun to Alec Baldwin. It was the AD Halls. And he's going to say, no, I didn't. Now you got a tremendous inconsistency there, and somebody's not telling the truth.
Well, Phil, one of the things no one, of course, would ever admit to lying. What they would say is that this is how I remember it today, right now. And that's how it's a prosecutor's job to say, well, you were interviewed 2 hours after the event. Would you agree that you probably had a better memory of it 2 hours after the event than you do have 5 months or 4 months after the event? So how are you remembering it so clearly now, yet not clearly 2 hours after the event? So that's how they would sort of cancel that out, as because no one could admit they're lying. That's perjury.
I'm wondering when you guys would interview somebody, did you have music playing in the background?
No.
Oh, okay. Because that Stephanopoulos interview, did you see that? Like, so an interview, where are we now in this day and age that we need to be entertained somehow, right? There's an interview. When you interview somebody, you ask them questions and they
there's absolutely
like building up, and then so right off the bat, that tells you there's a lot of editing going on. A lot of editing.
Yes. And one of the things about interview and interrogation is you want the room to be as plain as hell. There should absolutely never be a clock in any room that you interview someone in, because that's a distraction. The colors should be non-offensive, not bright. They should be of a neutral type of color.
Don't let out too much, Billy.
Well, one of the things that I always said to all the detectives is, Did you take the person's cell phone from them, or did you have them turn it off? That can 100% destroy an interview. If someone gets a call or tries to make a call during the interview, you might as well fold up the tent. You're done.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of techniques that we use when we're doing an interview, especially an interrogation. We've gone through it a little bit. I don't want to go too much, but you always want to have the person alone, obviously isolated, and you always want to have at least two people present doing the. Even if one person's doing the questioning, you want to have another person there. It's like a psychological move. It outnumbers them in their subconscious. So. But I think that there's a few other things. I'm not going to go into it, but yeah, there shouldn't be music playing. They were highly criticized for that interview, all over the media, all over the internet, Twitter. They made it like a motion picture production, and he's talking about this horrible accident that took a life of a young lady.
Yeah.
Or origami. Baldwin being backed by 25 career-seeking industry people. What if he found guilty? Do they all become accomplices? ABC should be charged with interfering with the course of justice. Well, that hasn't happened yet. They haven't interfered with it. I think that letter from the crew was just a smokescreen. And that's more for the civil case than it is for any potentiality of a criminal case. But look, obviously these people are, trying to circle the wagons. And, people that work on low budget movies, they're not getting hired a lot. So they want to stay in that industry, and they'll do whatever they can to get their next job,
They probably want to, like you said, stay in the industry. They want to look like a hero. And then everybody's entitled to their opinion. And they could say, in my particular position in this production, I didn't see anything that wasn't unsafe. They can take that opinion. But, again, if they're challenged, well, what would be something that is not safe is a question that I would ask. What would you consider something that's reckless or unsafe? And then you're going to get into their psyche or what they believe in based on their opinion. So I don't think that letter holds too much weight as far as I'm concerned. There's so much counter to that. There's people walking off the set, quitting, complaining that, and Baldwin even admitted that during the interview with Stephanopoulos that he was going to. There was complaints about the hotel that the people were staying at were an hour away, and he was going to go into his pocket and pay for something, an Airbnb that was closer to the set. So, I mean, he's basically admitting it. There's no question that there was unhappy people on that set involved in the production.
As there are on a lot of sets, even high budget sets, the people at the lowest level, they work the longest hours, they get paid the least, they get the worst accommodations, they get the worst food. So, I'm sure you go on any Hollywood set, not everyone's going to be a happy camper. Not everyone's making 10 million to star in the movie. The lower level people, they're just scraping by because they love to work within that industry. So guys, I think I'm going to go around and give you last words because we have another show tonight at 9:00. We're really burning the oil today. This is like my third or fourth show today. We're going to have the Red, White, and Bethune family come on. And if you guys have been following us and following Duty Ron, they're the family that travels around the country in their mobile home with their 3 kids. And they found Gabby Petito's van. And by them doing that, that enabled law enforcement to recover the remains of Gabby Petito. So it was a huge thing. And they're an interesting family. We're going to have them on our show at 9:00 tonight. Phil will be there with me. I don't think John Palucci is going to be there doing another gun demonstration, but I want to really thank you, John, for coming on the show tonight. And I'm going to give you some last words, and then we'll go to Phil last.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here. I just really want to, send condolences out to the victim's family. This has got to be so difficult for them. Any loss of life is tragic, and especially when the whole world's following it. It's terrible. So I just want to send my condolences out to them. I just want to also send my support out to the men and women that are investigating this scene. Crime scene reconstruction. They say, think about when you buy a puzzle that comes in a box, right? And now I give it to you, only I throw the cover away that has the picture on it that you're supposed to recreate, right? And then I take 2/3 of the pieces and I throw them away and I say, here, this is what happened, right? they got a big job. It might seem like it's a nothing thing. It's one shot fired. These things, the more you go into it, the harder it is. And I really want to let them know that we all, all of us here, we support them very much. They got a very difficult job to do.
You know, John, I would look at you when you were on the scene of a crime scene and it was 95 degrees and it smelled horrible. The body smelled. There was blood all over the place, blood spatter. And I was like, wow, he earns his damn money, this guy. You know, I wouldn't want to do that for anything, you know, wearing that white Tyvek suit, you know, the mask, the booties. I was like, oh, you can have that job.
Oh, that's, Tyvek suit. And I just had a scene in Staten Island a couple of years ago. It was there's no air conditioning in the house, like 104 in the house. Tyvek suit, gloves, everything.
Oh, horrible.
Yeah. So
Phil Grimaldi, last words.
Last words, John. Thank you so much. I think your demonstrations and your expertise is actually priceless. It really, I think, brought a tremendous amount of information and knowledge to the people, the viewers, to understand the inner workings of the gun and the firearms, and how we took apart some of the statements that Alec made during that interview. I just want to also mention in the last couple of shows since we did the Christmas show, I've been saying for our brothers and sisters in blue to be safe. Always something that seems to happen around this time of the year. Last night, an off-duty lieutenant was shot. He got into a gunfight with a bunch of guys trying to rob him. I think he was shot about 3 or 4 times, but he is going to live. He's okay. One of the bad guys DOA, so that's one for us. Guys, wear your vest out there, guys and gals. Be safe. Go home to your families. It's a beautiful time of the year. My sister complimented the Christmas lights in the background. Let's all have a safe and healthy and happy holiday season. And again, Bill, I guess I'll be seeing you in a little while. We're going to do that.
That's for sure. We're
really looking forward to the Bethunes. That was really important to the Petito case. It was almost like divine intervention for them to be there at that specific time with their video camera, you know?
100%. And, you know, guys, we're burning the midnight oil. We're charging towards 25,000 subscribers, and you can help us. So we'll see you guys at 9 o'clock. Thank you guys for subscribing, for supporting Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. Have a good night and be safe.
Stay safe, everybody.
Take care.
One episode just ain't enough.